And I think the feeling sometimes we have is that God is disappointed with us. God is now being like, you're not fulfilling the role I've had for you right now. We could feel a little bit like James Franklin in Penn State, like the heat is coming on us when we don't live up to our own spiritual expectations. Welcome back to the What's It Up podcast. I'm your host, Pete Dill. I appreciate you all checking in and watching and listening to this episode today. We're going to talk about a lot. We're going to talk about James Franklin getting fired from his coaching position at Penn State and why God is never trying to fire us from our positions as his disciples. So jumping right into it, James Franklin was the head coach of the Penn State Nittany Lions, college football team. For those of you that don't know, Penn State, really big, famous college football program, and they've had this coach, James Franklin, who's been there for years. He's been there for about 15 years, and he won a lot of games, but he never won the big one, never won a championship. And the expectations of the fan base, the alumni, was that they wanted to win a championship, and they put all these expectations on him every single year, and he never could get through with it. They lost a few games in a row, and Penn State fired James Franklin. Everyone wanted championships. James Franklin couldn't deliver it, even though he was close. He couldn't deliver it, so they fired him. And it made me think about the expectations that we all live under, but how our spiritual life and our faith in Christ is different than a high-pressure college football program. Because we all live under expectations. Bosses, school, tests, mortgages, you name it. Clubs you're a part of, social things, relationship expectations. We all live under these expectations. And believe it or not, we don't always live up to these expectations we have for ourselves, the expectations that others have for us. And sometimes, specifically when we fail in our faith life, in our spiritual life, we feel like God is disappointed with us. That's a very common thing we feel, which I've failed and now God is disappointed with me. So if the expectations for living a good Catholic life is I need to pray more, I need to sin less, I need to do good more, I need to go to church more, I need to do all these things more and more and more, I need to get rid of all these bad habits, I need to wake up earlier, I need to do all these things, be more virtuous, I need to do more. And then we never really can live up to those expectations, even though we try hard. So we fall short. And I think the feeling sometimes we have is that God is disappointed with us. God is now being like, you're not fulfilling the role I've had for you right now. We could feel a little bit like James Franklin in Penn State, like the heat is coming on us when we don't live up to our own spiritual expectations. But that's not really who God is. God's not a coach who's trying to bench us. God is not a board of directors who's trying to fire us from being the head of our coach. He's not a alumni base begging for our job. That's not really the nature of God. God is actually like this loving father and person who's on the journey with you shoulder to shoulder. God is not up in the clouds casting down expectations more and more for us to live out. God is a person who's on the road with us, on the journey with us. And the spiritual life is less and less like a coaching role or a player role where we have to kind of always constantly fulfill and do better. And what have you done for me lately? The spiritual life is a journey, closer to a journey like the Hobbits and Lord of the Rings, just like a journey. And the biggest difference is that our kind of journey is towards someone, Jesus, but also that someone is with us on the journey. So we're going towards something, but that something is also with us along the journey, helping us, coaching us along. Because in God's kingdom, in the spiritual journey, not living up to expectations and failing and not living up to expectations doesn't disqualify us. And we don't need to look very far in our own lives of where we failed, but God still gave us mercy and kept us along the journey. But we also don't need to look far in the Bible or the great spiritual Catholic heroes of our life. I mean, think of Paul, who was literally, a persecutor of Christians. Think of Peter, denied Jesus, anger, cut off a guy's ear. Think of Moses, didn't follow God. Think of Abraham, brought on another concubine and had a child out of wedlock. I mean, you go from the very beginning, every single person who was a hero also didn't live up to expectations. Think of David. Think of King David. The King David united all the tribes of Israel. Massive, massive shortcomings in his of the flesh, with Bathsheba and Bathsheba's husband. Like, we don't need to look far to see how God doesn't disqualify us when we fail. God is not looking for our perfection, but we often so much put those expectations on our spiritual life. We think and I know I think this, I think I have to be perfect for God. I've learned my lesson. I need to be perfect for God now. I need to just do things perfectly. But time after time after time, I can't do it. Maybe you can. I can't. And it's because God's not looking for our perfection. He's looking for our relationship. He's looking for our heart. He's looking for us to give our lives over day after day after day to him. And he's looking for our humility and our softness of heart to just give to him day by day. God is not keeping a win-loss record of our spiritual life. God's not like, all right, Pete has 47 wins, but he's got 43 losses this year. Almost 500. It's not great. We need you more in the 600, 700 winning percentage. God's not keeping a win-loss detailed record of our failures and our wins. He's deeply trying to draw us in to himself more. I saw a Bishop Barron video recently where he was talking about the gospel and how, there's a lot of message in the Bible and in the early church and right now, which is go spread the gospel, preach the gospel to the masses, to people, to ourselves. And Bishop Barron said, what is the gospel? And he gave us stories about how he's been in different debates and different conversations with Protestant people, with Catholics, and he always posed this question of what is the gospel? And the answers always come back as to some sort of ethos, some sort of reflection of the gospel, some sort of ethical consequence of the gospel. So the gospel is believing in Jesus and having faith in Jesus and saved by grace through our faith and we go to heaven. Or the gospel is that Jesus said to, preach. And so the gospel is this idea of preaching. And what Bishop Barron says is that the gospel is actually purely just Jesus. So when we say go preach the gospel, it is purely about entering more into just Jesus. Less about the consequences, the result of that, less about I'm saved by grace and faith and the sacraments, and I need to receive the sacraments a certain amount of time and going to mass once a week, that's the bare minimum. Those are ethical consequences, ethical results of the gospel. The gospel, spreading the good news of the gospel is that Jesus is. Jesus is God and he became man to save us. And so when I think about this, relationship, when I think about when I think about then not living up to expectations. Well, I'm not living up to expectations and I keep failing at this spiritual life, or I keep failing at the gospel or spreading the gospel or living up to the message of the gospel. I think sometimes it's easy to miss the point that it's true. The Catholic life, the gospel, following Jesus truly is about that relationship with Jesus himself, building that relationship, entering into that relationship more and more. And the great thing about that is the more that we enter into a relationship with God, we actually have to do less. And the expectation that we have to do all these things to be good is lessened, and more about, hey, we have the freedom to do these things and that God is really the one doing the changing. That deep down inside, we can try, but we're going to fail. But when we kind of purely submit our hearts and our wills and our day to God, that is when the true change happens. And that is when we can then start to go to mass and pray and receive the sacraments and be virtuous. And it flows from God to us. And we're changed, less about the things we're doing and pushing them to God, and then he gives us something back. I don't know if that's too metaphysical or ontological if I'm speaking about that even clearly, but I think it's relevant because, Bishop Barron says that, hey, the gospel is a person. The gospel is a relationship. The good news of the gospel is a relationship. It's a person, just like a friend. And so when we think about, hey, but this friend is not expecting a win-loss or a winning percentage or stats at the end of the day of the year. He's expecting our hearts to just completely be fully open, and he's going to do the work. And that is harder to rationalize. Wins and losses are easier to see. 7 wins, 2 losses. That's pretty good. 3 wins, 10 losses. That's pretty bad. But what Christ wants is our hearts fully, completely, totally soft, not hardened at all. And that's a disposition. That is a perspective. That's a philosophy. That's an internal positioning. So that's a little bit harder because we have to then say, well, actually, that means that like I have to actually look at people differently. I have to think about my work differently. I have to think about my school differently. I have to think about how I'm going to go about my day differently. I have to think about how I give differently, because it's all coming from this place of purely being a disciple to God. When we put it purely on metrics or stats, we can start to develop this feeling of losing. Oh, I'm losing. I'm not doing well. My spiritual life is bad. I'm not doing well. I need to be better. I'm losing. But when our disposition is that of, Lord, I'm not going to be perfect, but my heart is completely yours, and I'm going to just say that day after day after day, every day is a new start to be yours, to my heart be yours, to submit my will to yours, to be humble, to not be proud. That is when we can start to see some real change in our lives. And then we can see that God is the one doing the work, not us. We don't live for the scoreboard. We live for Jesus. And the good thing is that Jesus already won. So the scoreboard's irrelevant. This is already garbage time. We're already playing. We're up by 50. It's garbage time. We already won. Jesus already scored all the touchdowns. He did all the hard work. All we have to do is come in and play a little bit of garbage time. And so what is something we can do, though, to kind of shift our perspective from a stats and metrics perspective in our spiritual life and more of an openness and soft heart perspective of our spiritual life? Let's think of one area this week of which we're begging for approval, whether it's from a family member, a parent, a boss, a friend, a coworker, a teacher. Let's think of an area of which we're striving for approval. And let's just completely give it up to God and say, Lord, I trust your plan every single time it pops into our head. Every single time this idea of approval, I need to get a good grade, I need to get the promotion, or I need to crush that meeting, or I need to do this for my dad, I need to do this for my brother. Every time one of those pops into our head of performance this week, let's just give that to God and say, Lord, I trust your plan. And let's just see what happens. Let's just see what happens. And then if something good happens, write back to me. And if nothing happens, also write back to me in a comment or a DM or something. Because I think the idea is like, let's trust that our hearts are all God needs, not our like best performance. Because God's the one really doing the work here. You know what I mean? Like if God stopped loving me, I would cease to exist right now, this very second. So God's really the one doing the work here. I'm kind of just talking into a microphone. God is really the one doing the hard work of my existence right now. So that's going to be it for me today. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this idea of not living up to expectations and not having to perform, but allowing our hearts just be molded by God. And then let me know if you, if you say that prayer of trusting in God's plan this week, and let me know how it goes. And I'd love to hear about it from you. So that's going to be all for me today, y'all. I appreciate you spending some time. Make sure you like, share, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. Share this with someone who you think might like it. And I appreciate y'all. Hope to hear from you. Talk to you soon. Peace. Bye.